Yeah, good morning, doctors, PG students, as well as the senior faculties and head of the departments. It's been a great privilege and honor to once again welcome one and all of you for this Regain PG 18th edition. As you're all aware, this program had been quite consistent and a weekly program is starting on every Monday, and today marks the 18th edition of it. So, since the students will be starting their exams very shortly, so we call that probably this could be the last edition for this season one. But we are sure that we'll once again catch up after this brief gap after for the examinations, and then we again start off with our season two. So, but of course, we are extremely happy that for the encouraging participation from all the students, and we are also keep getting feedback that all the students have been really benefited out of this program, and all of this and the entire program had been continuously getting uploaded in the YouTube. So it is also good for each and every student, for all of them to exactly listen to at their own convenience whenever they are free. So with this brief note, I take this opportunity to thank all the faculties who have been part of this the journey of almost 18 editions, and as a token of small gratitude to all of them, so we made a small video clipping how this entire journey started during the lockdown period and how it has been going. So I request my colleague Mr. Naveen to play this video, and then we'll go on to this session.
Thank you very much on behalf of Microlabs.
Thank you very much. I must thank Microlab for felicitating me today. I mean, this is in fact not required. Actually, you are doing a good service to all the DM and the DNB students. And thank you, Microlab, for helping us in arranging this academic program and teaching program for our DM and DNB students. It has been appreciated by all the students, and it over last almost 5 months continuously, and the cooperation of, I must thank all the faculty who spared their time for this academic activity, and also I am sure all the students, it will be of great help for them in the examination. Thank you, Microlab.
I am General P.P. Verma. I am head of nephrology at Venkateshwar Hospital, Dwarka. It has been a pleasure for me to be associated with Microlab, their Regain academic program. I got associated with them around 3 years back when they started doing their annual conference in nephrology with adequate representation and adequate international representation. I remember first time it was held in Bhutan, second time it was held in Kathmandu, etc. So, however, I feel happy that gradually Regain has expanded.
Regain Educational Program is an excellent initiative which has helped in the practical teaching of postgraduates both in India and abroad. I commend the organizers for this and congratulate them on having reached this milestone.
I'm extremely impressed by the Regain program started by Microlabs. It is an extremely useful program for postgraduate education and for training and teaching of nephrologists in general. The conferences which have been organized by Regain have been exceptional quality, very high standards, and I am extremely happy and pleased to be part of it. The way to go forward would be to involve all the nephrologists from India itself and maybe even from outside. Now that with the digital platforms, it's become easier to get hold of the experts from outside India as well, and I'm sure they will be able to raise the bar further in improving the quality of education that we are imparting to our nephrologists. I'm sure Micro Foundation will help in involving nephrologists, and I'll be more than glad to be part of it. Again, PG program is exceptional, and I would hope that we should continue it and involve teachers of exceptional quality from across the country. Best wishes.
So you have to unmute and speak.
Yeah, thank you, Naveen. Sir, once again, I take this opportunity to thank one and all of you for this wonderful program, which kept us going on for the 18th edition now. So today would be the mark of the most important, the final edition for this first session. So I request Dr. Balaji to give the brief about the guest speaker for the today and accordingly take up the session from here. Over to you, Dr. Balaji.
Thank you, Mr. Raja. On behalf of Department of Nephrology, I welcome all to this 18th Regain edition. This will be the last edition before exams, which will be on 17th of September for DNB students. As far as for DM students are there, still the dates are not final. The guest faculty today is Professor Shantar Prasad, who is the unit head and professor of nephrology at prestigious Kasturba Medical College, Manipal. He has got vast experience of academics and research and is a very experienced examiner. And I'm sure all of you will gain with his bedside teaching and even know the questions and answers as preparation for exam. The presenter today is final year DM students from Madras Medical College, Dr. M. Aarti, and I'm sure she will have a good practice for her exams. And I'm grateful to all the guest speakers who have participated in this Regain program over the last 5 months. And I am also thankful to all the young nephrologists, budding nephrologists who have been presenting these cases after doing a lot of hard work. And I thank all the participants for active question answer session and during the presentation, especially by contributing in the chat box. Over to you, Professor Shantar Prasad.
Thank you, Bala sir. Thanks for the opportunity. And Aarti is there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, very good morning, Aarti. And,
good morning, sir.
So feel comfortable, and you are in the final year, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Start your case presentation.
I'm presenting Mr. Karthik, 37 years, who has studied up to 5th standard, working as a welder from Perambur, part of Chennai, a hemodialysis patient who has come with complaints of fever for 1 day. History of presenting illness. Patient was apparently normal till December 2019, when he noticed bilateral lower limb swelling and facial puffiness for 2 weeks, followed by vomiting and hiccups for 1 week. There was no history of passing blood and urine, no history of frothy urine or decreased urine output. At this point of time, his urine output was 2 liters per day. No history of similar edematous episodes in the past. No history of any loin pain or passing stones in urine. No history of burning micturition. There was no history of double voiding, nocturnal bedwetting, or childhood UTI episodes, and no history of skin rash, oral ulcer, photosensitivity, joint pain, or increased hair fall. No history of any recent throat infection or skin lesions preceding the symptoms. No history of native medicine or any protein supplement use. He has been taking some painkillers some 4 to 5 times in a month for the last 6 months. So, with this history, when he was evaluated at the Madras Medical College, at the time of admission, he was detected with hypertension and started on a single drug for the same. Patient was told to have some form of kidney impairment after a few blood investigations and urine tests, and he was advised a kidney biopsy. Post biopsy, there was no hematuria or no other complications. And after the biopsy report, he was told to have advanced stage of kidney failure, advised AV fistula creation, and he was discharged on certain medications. 1 month later, patient presented with complaints of vomiting and hiccups for 2 weeks. This was in January, associated with breathlessness, increasing bilateral lower limb swelling, and decreasing urine output. So at this point, the urine output had dropped to 1 liter per day. When he was admitted for the second time, he was advised emergency initiation of hemodialysis. A non-tunneled catheter was inserted on the right side of the neck, and patient was initiated on twice weekly hemodialysis. 2 weeks after the initiation, there was history of fever during dialysis, for which some IV medications were given for 5 days after each HD session, and fever resolved. His blood investigations were told to have revealed some infection. However, the catheter was retained at that time. In February, that is 2 weeks after initiation of the dialysis, an AV fistula was constructed on the left wrist. In March, there was one history of emergency hospitalization for acute breathlessness. So at that time, the urine output had dropped to less than 100 ml per day, and patient was changed to thrice weekly hemodialysis and advised strict fluid restriction to less than 500 ml per day with salt restriction. His AV fistula was cannulated after 40 days of creation, and patient underwent hemodialysis through the fistula for the next 3 months without any issues. The HD catheter was removed after 3 successful AV fistula cannulations. There was no history of difficulty in AVF cannulation, no history of any poor blood flow during dialysis, no history of excessive pressure alarms during dialysis, no history of prolonged bleeding after needle removal. There was no history of pain, numbness, tingling, or coldness of hands during dialysis. So 3 months after the AVF was cannulated, he was admitted in May with complaints of fever, vomiting, and breathlessness for 3 days. There was no history of cough with expectoration, hemoptysis, or wheezing. No history of abdominal pain or loose stools. On evaluation, he was found to be COVID positive and admitted in an isolation ward. At the same time, patient noticed absence of thrill over his left wrist AV fistula. Again, a right neck non-tunneled HD catheter was inserted and patient was dialyzed. He was on oxygen therapy via face mask for 10 days. There is no history of suggestive of any non-invasive or invasive ventilation. No history of any special experimental drug therapy or blood product transfusion during admission in the COVID ward. After 10 days, patient improved symptomatically. His COVID test was told to be negative and he was discharged with advice of 2 weeks of home isolation. Then 1 month later, a patient had again come with fever for 1 day during dialysis. This was in June. Received IV antibiotics post dialysis. As fever persisted for more than 2 days, HD catheter was removed and a new catheter was reinserted for the third time on the right side of the neck after a gap of 3 days. So, and there was also one more hospitalization for volume overload symptoms, for which he underwent an emergency HD. That time he was told to have poor cardiac function and to follow strict fluid restriction in addition to the thrice weekly dialysis. So in July 2nd, left mid forearm AV fistula was constructed. There is no history of any blood transfusions during dialysis, no history of vomiting, giddiness, or muscle cramps during dialysis. History of intradialytic hypertension since the last 2 months. And Antihypertensives were hiked to 2 classes of drugs. No history of headache during dialysis. Since the last 2 months, there is no history of breathlessness in the interdialytic period, and the interdialytic weight gain has come down from 4 kg to 3 kg. Patient is on monthly once iron injections and twice a week erythropoietin injection since February. It was transiently stopped for 1 month during the COVID admission and resumed now. And history of post-dialysis fatigue is there for 4 to 5 hours after the dialysis session. He has finished 3 doses of hepatitis B vaccination till now. The booster dose is due next week, and history of pneumococcal vaccination 2 doses at the time of initiation of HD. Now his current complaint is again fever for 1 day during dialysis. Currently the HD catheter is 2 months old now, and the left forearm AV fistula is 1 month old. He was on living donor kidney transplant with spouse as donor, ABO compatible. The donor evaluation did not reveal any comorbidities. She was told to have normal renal function. Immunological tests were found to be matching. Patient was planned for LRRT in March. However, it was deferred due to the COVID pandemic. Coming to the past history, no history of diabetes, tuberculosis, bronchial asthma, epilepsy, CVA, thyroid problem, or any jaundice. No history of prior surgeries or blood transfusions. He is a non-smoker, used to consume alcohol occasionally once in 3 to 4 months till before December 2019. No history of tobacco chewing, consumes mixed diet. Currently, his fluid consumption is restricted to 300 ml per day. There is no family history of renal disease. He is the firstborn out of a non-consanguineous marriage, and he has got 2 children aged 15 and 11 years. Shall I summarize my history, sir?
Yeah, yes, Arthi.
We have a 37-year-old male detected with renal impairment in December 2019 when he presented with volume overload and uremic features. Underwent a renal biopsy and was advised AV fistula creation then itself. And then he was initiated on an emergency hemodialysis in January. So from January till now, he has had 3 episodes of infection suggestive of catheter-related bloodstream infections and a secondary failure of an AV fistula with a recent admission for COVID pneumonia as well.
Yeah, your history presentation is good. The flow was good. So your summary is also nice. So what are all the complications in the summary? Can you please mention? Other than CRBSA and COVID, what else he had?
Yes, sir. He had one secondary failure of our AV fistula.
Yeah. Yes.
And then there was new hypertension was there from the beginning. Intradialytic hypertension was detected since the last 2 months, and his antihypertensive medications have been hiked up. That's it, sir. And there is evidence he was told to have some cardiac dysfunction.
Okay, so these
because
are all
of
the
recurrent
complications.
pulmonary edema. Yes, sir.
What do you think the etiology wise, like primary diagnosis?
Yes, sir. So the initial presenting history was brief for around 2 weeks. His lower limb swelling and facial puffiness was there for only 2 weeks. So when he presented at that point of time, my DD will be either an RPRF or an acute on CKD, because previously there was no history to suggest any kidney involvement. So after the urine analysis, probably I would try to differentiate. So my syndromic diagnosis will be both RPRF and acute on CKD.
No, that you are telling at the time of
admission, first admission.
Admission, sir. Yes, yes, yes. Now I want to know your total diagnosis, final diagnosis in this case. Like.
So right now, patient is in CKD 5 HD stage.
Correct.
Native kidney disease, probably a chronic glomerular disease.
Okay.
Like IgA nephropathy or C3G, sir, because the age of onset, presentation with renal failure, hypertension, and volume overload.
Yes.
Though the progression seems to be quite fast. Or he turned up in the late stages of the disease.
Yes, understood. So primary diagnosis wise, like it's a CKD stage 5D that I very clear because
Yes,
he's
sir.
on dialysis. Biopsy was done, told to have advanced kidney failure, and
Yes, sir.
now he's on dialysis and planned for a live-related renal transplant.
Yes,
So
sir.
in your history, there are two ways we can think. Like, why you think it's a CGN is the first thing, and why can't it be a chronic tubulointerstitial nephritis? You understood,
Yeah.
no?
Yes, sir.
I want to discuss your case in two ways. One is at the November. If you see the patient in November when he presented 2 weeks, what will be your syndromic diagnosis? And then etiology. And second one is like at the present, like you are examining him in June, planned for a transplant, and now it looks
Yes,
like a CKD5D, and etiology wise, you think first DD is chronic glomerular
Glomerular disease.
nephritis. Why can't it be CTIN is my differential diagnosis for you? Can you list the positive and negative findings for both?
Yes, sir. So regarding chronic tubulointerstitial nephritis, usually they will not have hypertension except for ADPKD and reflex nephropathy. Here there is no history to suggest reflex nephropathy, and
Correct.
usually they will not have edema, whereas his presenting symptom was with features of volume overload. And third, there was no history of any chronic NSAID use, no incriminating factors for CIN history.
Okay.
So all these are like against CIN, sir.
Okay. What are all the positive points for your CGN then?
CGN one was with the volume overload straight away. Then
edema you think is more common in glomerular disease. Agreeable then?
Yes, sir. And then hypertension. So it was at the first admission he was told to have high BP.
No, in your case, the hypertension was only controlled with single drug, right? It's a very
Yes,
mild
sir.
hypertension.
Mild
If you think if somebody is reaching end stage renal disease of a glomerular disease, what do you think? Hypertension will be severe or mild, which controls with single drug?
Severe, sir.
Yeah, so hypertension is mild, which is may not favor you a CGN. Means it's the it can favor a CGN or CTIN. Okay, then
I would like to base my diagnosis next on the urine analysis report, sir. At that point in December.
That I agree. If you get an urinalysis at the time of admission, yes, you will get a fair idea. Now urinalysis at CKD5D with very 100 ml of output may not give you any picture. So if you take, he's a young male. So put it from your side, you think it's a CGN. Why
Yes,
you put IgA as the first diagnosis instead of other glomerular disease?
Sir, MCD does not progress to ESRD. For FSGS,
no, first you tell why IgA. Rather than telling about the other disease not, you tell why IgA.
Sir, the commonest cause of ESRD in the second and the third decades of life, amongst the causes of chronic glomerular diseases is IgA nephropathy, sir.
Correct. So it's the most common glomerular disease, can present in the third decade, male predominant, agreeable. Then what else in your case?
And rapid progression to ESRD.
See, rapid progression in ESRD in an IgA, how frequent? So if I give you IgA as the first diagnosis, can you tell me like what are all the percentage of presentation of IgA into your clinic?
Yes, sir. Sir, like 30% of them will present with subnephrotic proteinuria. Nearly 50 to 60% will have microscopic hematuria, and only less than 5% can have nephrotic proteinuria. But the natural history of the disease will be progression to ESRD over the next minimum 8 to 10 years. Sir. It again depends upon the degree of proteinuria at presentation, serum creatinine at presentation, and blood pressure.
Yes. So what do you think in your case, if it is an IgA, why it has presented like this? See, patient was absolutely asymptomatic till 36 years of age, and one day, 2 weeks of edema has come, right?
Yes, sir.
And then you found out that there is a renal failure.
Yes, sir.
And we have done a kidney biopsy.
Yes, sir.
That means it is not at gone kidney. If it is a small kidney, again it favors you a CTIN.
Yes,
so it's a some size kidney where you wanted to establish the diagnosis, and he was not given any immunosuppression also. Nobody has treated because of the biopsy. They have found it's an advanced stage.
Yes,
so how frequently you found IgA presenting to you as an advanced stage like this?
Usually they will have symptoms prior to reaching ESRD stage.
Yes.
Secondary related to either uncontrolled hypertension,
Yes.
or they can have the gross macroscopic hematuria.
Correct.
But few percentage of patients, like he would not have noticed his symptoms probably before.
Yes.
So presenting in the advanced stage of.
So what's the odd feature in your case? Again, it's a mild hypertension with single drug. Is very odd feature to say patient presented you with a almost advanced kidney disease. Usually IgA also will have less percentage. Most common presentation is asymptomatic, where you find out them in screening. You will have some
Yes, sir.
microscopic hematuria, you have subnephrotic proteinuria. Then second will be like 5 to 15%, as you told, will be nephrotic syndrome. And the third will be like a very least chance of like CKD. If you think at the 2 weeks history of edema and you put it as an in the initially you told it as an RPRF, like then if
Yes,
it is
sir.
an IgA, how it would have presented as an RPR? What would
Can
be
be
the
a
reason?
crescentic IgA nephropathy.
Yes.
That could have presented as RPR also.
Yes. So it should be a crescents in IgA or
Or
what
an
else?
IgA vasculitis.
Correct. IgA vasculitis.
Or an IgA coexisting with another RPGN like anti-GBM.
Okay. Another possibility where you want to put two diagnoses, which is unlikely. Yes. Then malignant hypertension with TMA. See, IgA also can have malignant hypertension, but in your case, the BP is low. It may be on the lower down. But you should think of only two things. One is crescentic IgA, if you want to put it as an IgA.
IgA nephropathy.
Why you think it is not an other glomerular disease?
Yes, sir. Sir, first MCD, it will not progress to ESRD. Then
Yes.
for
So MCD, FSGS, membranous are out because they rarely present to you with advanced kidney disease in a biopsy. Means you will have previous episodes or edema for a longer duration. So nephrotic syndrome times you have gone. Okay.
Okay, sir.
But is unlikely in the initial whatever your presentation. So when it comes to the nephritic or RPRF presentation, so what are all the things comes to your mind? You told one is IgA, you told, agreeable. Then
Second DD will be C3GN, sir.
C3GN or MPGN due to any etiology. Okay. Then
Third, though there are no features to suggest a systemic lupus erythematosus, that can again be lupus nephritis, very unlikely.
now you are told negative history wise, no secondary glomerular disease, no history
Yes, sir.
suggestive of anything which can contribute to tubulointerstitial disease or genetic disease. So
Yes, sir.
secondary causes unlikely. In the primary, what are all the things? You told IgA because
Yes,
it's commonest with some crescents, maybe that time, and it would have been advanced kidney disease on biopsy. Yes.
Yes,
Then C3GN is an MPGN. Yes, it can present like an progressive mild to moderate proteinuria and have hypertension, and then they can have renal failure at presentation with crescents or without crescent. That is the C3GN.
Yes, sir.
Why can't it be vasculitis? It's an RPRF with the classical oncovasculitis or anti-GBM.
Sir, there was history-wise, there was no history of skin rash or joint pain. And
Onca may not be like always you will have skin
systemic
rash or
involvement.
joint pains, right?
Yes, sir.
So here, if you take it at the November history, like when you presented with edema and renal failure, what was the proteinuria? You were not unable to ask his proteinuria, like whether it was estimated, because he was
Yes,
non-oliguric, right?
He was non-oliguric, sir. His urine analysis that time had revealed 2+ albumin, no RBCs, 2 to 3 pus cells.
Okay. So if you have the urinalysis at that time and if you know, that's a different thing. So, but with your history, like you are telling some edema was there, proteinuria wise
Yes,
is
sir.
unclear. Because the patient told you had a nephrotic proteinuria or means subnephrotic proteinuria, you don't have any idea.
The patient did not reveal anything, sir. This report, like we got it from his records. Sir.
Okay, that's fine. So if he has not revealed about proteinuria, if you don't know whether it is really nephrotic proteinuria or subnephrotic, right? So in this scenario, you still have a dilemma. It may be a nephrotic syndrome with pure AK.
Yes, sir.
Because 2 weeks history of edema with renal failure is there.
Renal failure.
That also can come to your mind as a DD. The syndromic diagnosis, when you see the patient who comes with you at edema and mild hypertension, these are all the things will come to you that maybe you want to rule out many things. It may be nephrotic syndrome with AK or RPRF, where CKD becomes the bottom line.
Okay,
Because
sir.
history-wise it's a short duration. And you don't want. So only if you examine and urinalysis may give a clue for chronic kidney disease.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in your case, you did a biopsy. So
Yes, sir.
and found to have, when do you do a biopsy in these type of patients?
Any new onset nephrotic syndrome in an adult,
Yes.
or presence of microscopic hematuria, gross hematuria.
Now, in
or
your case,
unexpected-
you tell me, like the patient came to you with edema and mild hypertension and renal failure. Yes, it's an indication for biopsy.
Yes, sir.
So, but in the biopsy, you got an advanced kidney failure, right?
Yes, sir.
So there will be borderline features you may have when you have seen the patient in the clinic.
Ultrasound. Yes, sir.
Yes.
We will assess the kidney size if it is more than 8.5 centimeter with preserved
A
cardicomedullary.
normal size kidney you want to biopsy. Yes, then.
Yes, sir. And no features of, cardicomedullary differentiation should be maintained.
Correct.
Then no evidence of obstruction.
Mhm.
Then other reversible causes like hypovolemia, hypercalcemia, infections have been ruled out.
Now my thing is, when you have a biopsy report is advanced kidney failure for you, right?
Okay. Yes,
As the
sir.
patient also told he didn't given any treatment, no immunosuppression, and he was
Yes,
told
sir.
to get an AV fistula done.
Yes,
So
sir.
these are the borderline cases where you err on the side of doing a biopsy or not doing a biopsy. You're right. When you
Yes,
see
sir.
it like this in your clinic.
Yes,
So
sir.
what makes you to do a biopsy? What makes not to do a biopsy, especially in this stage? Like what I'm telling is, if
Why
on
did
examination
the
he may be having anemia, he may have chronic features of chronic edema, he may have pruritus, whatever it is at that time, which may point few things, and urinalysis or some of the investigation may point to a CKD. You got what I want to ask. When
Yes,
you
sir.
have a case
That-
where your clinical examination, urinalysis, and your biochemical investigation points to a CKD, would you like to biopsy or not? And if, of course, it would have been a grade 2 to 3 changes in this case before somebody wants to attempt a biopsy.
Yes, sir. So mainly to know the native kidney disease because he is a
Yes,
young
that is very-
patient
correct,
planned
correct.
for
I agree with you.
transplant.
Yes. So since here your main intention would have been to know the native
out
kidney
the
disease, because this
cause.
patient is being planned for a kidney transplant and he's a young fellow. If, for example, what I'm telling is, if he has HB of some 8 at the time of presentation and he had deranged calcium, phosphorus, high PTH, and on ultrasound, if the
Contracted
kidney shows
kidneys.
some grade 3 changes, proteinuria of just around 1.5 to 2 gram, if he's 70-year-old, we may not biopsy also. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Here main intention would have been to establish the diagnosis,
Native
because he was not treated at all. Means if it is
Yes,
an RPRF, you would have given some immunosuppression, like you would have
Yes, sir.
pulsed and then biopsied and then see for whether it is a like crescents or fibrous crescents or completely end stage.
Yes, sir.
Got?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's what in the November, when you have seen, as diagnosis can go more strongly favors an RPRF, where you need
RPRF.
a biopsy to know the different diagnosis.
Yes, sir.
IgA, yes, T3 can be another GN which can rarely present, but vasculitis comes to the early, means it may be an onca vasculitis where it may have a burnt out case.
Okay, sir.
They also can present like an RPRF, 2 weeks of edema and renal failure, where if you biopsy and then you may not find anything, and with an end stage renal disease. So as far as the case is concerned, if you think proteinuria is mild, like if you think urine is only 2+ protein, whether
Okay.
you can put chronic tubulointerstitial nephritis in this case. I just want to know, like you completely disagree that it is not a tubulointerstitial disease, or you would like to keep it as a DD because you have a biopsy which shows advanced kidney disease and nothing was given to him and he was told to have means to go ahead with the fistula and then renal replacement therapy on near future.
Yes, sir. Sir, since he was already near the end stage kidney disease, this initially probably he would have had tubular proteinuria. Then whether we can take it as a secondary FSGS, secondary to the underlying CIN, only
Yes.
that might cause like 2+ proteinuria. Sir.
Yes, agree with you. So see, in some of the proteinurias can be there. One is secondary FSGS, any CTIN where you can have more proteinuria due to any of the things. I agree with. One is secondary FSGS you told, like
Yes, sir.
vascular reflux or renal caricular disease,
Yes, sir.
whatever it can cause a damage to kidney, single kidney, all those things agree with you. So what else? Can you list out the causes for CTIN?
Yes, sir. One will be commonest we see is reflex nephropathy, secondary to vesico-ureteric reflex, then ADPKD, then other systemic conditions leading to CIN, like autoimmune disorders like SLE, Sjogren syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis, then drugs like NSAIDs.
Yes. So
then-
can NSAID can have more proteinuria? Is it possible?
I don't know whether specifically it can increase the proteinuria, sir.
No, it depends. Like NSAID, what are all the diseases you can come across with an NSAID and kidney disease, if I give a choice?
Yes, one will be hemodynamically mediated,
Yes, that is
renal
acute tubular necrosis means you will have a,
vasoconstriction,
it's correct. And
pre-renal AKI picture. Then there can be nephrotoxic ATN.
yes,
Then, third, there can be type 4 distal RTA.
mhm.
Then chronic abuse can lead to chronic interstitial nephritis, sir.
Yes, chronic abuse in the sense like
Like
any drug,
long-term
like-
use.
Yes, correct. Then
That's all.
so in your case, what I want to say is some factors favors CTIN. Like what about his occupation and thing? Anything you come across?
Sir, he was a welder who was exposed to excessive heat exposure since the
Okay.
last 12 years. He has been working since the last 12 years.
Okay.
So again, that can lead to a possibility of CKD-U kind of picture.
Okay.
But usually they will not present with edema or hypertension. That will
No,
be
in
more
your case,
predominantly
hypertension is mild. You can't defend with
Mild,
mild,
sir.
hypertension. And
Yes, sir.
edema with 2+ protein can be there in some of the CKD-Us, like
sir.
as if it is an advanced disease. So, but presentation will not be edema. That's the against point. I agree with you. So, what I want is in your case, mild hypertension is there, kidney biopsy, and he has presented directly with you as an end-stage renal disease
Renal
without
disease.
any symptoms in the past suggestive of any other secondary causes. Why can't it be CKD-U? Is my my question to you.
That is possible, sir.
Okay. So
That is
so what are all the welder with kidney disease means occupation and kidney disease? What are all the things you can come to your mind?
one will be CKD-U seen in patients who are having excessive heat exposure, like manual laborers, coal miners, agricultural workers,
Correct.
and then this welding.
Welding causes what toxicity do you have? At least you said because your patient is a welder now.
Yes, sir.
Any idea you have? Welding means you weld many metals, right?
Yes, sir.
It
So
may be steel or it may be any other metal. So it
heavy
depends
metal
upon the,
exposure.
yes, he may develop a heavy metal exposure. Why can't it be in your case is my question to you.
Possible, sir, but no history of any systemic involvement to suggest
No, it depends upon the type of withdrawal
heavy
that
metal involved.
aware of which can cause kidney disease, KDU.
Lead, mercury, aluminium.
Aluminium unlikely. Aluminium means of course in dialysis. Yes, agree then.
पेशेंट नहीं आने में मंदिर जाना है.
Yes. Hello.
That's all I can remember, sir.
No, welders, just for the academic purpose, they are exposed to like majority depends upon cadmium. Are you aware of cadmium and
Yes,
the
sir.
CKD-U, which is linked to cadmium?
So increased levels of cadmium in the groundwater
Yeah.
has been seen in areas with high epidemiology of CKD-U.
Yes. No, I agree with you. That's a thing. Like any disease in any country, you have found out like cadmium is more, and just what are all the endemic nephropathies you are aware of?
The Mesoamerican nephropathy.
Correct.
Then aristolochic acid nephropathies.
Very good.
Also. And the CKD-U in Sri Lanka and in Andhra Udanam.
Andhra, what is that called?
Udanam nephropathy, sir.
So what are all the causes you would have found in our places, like predisposing causes for to develop a CKDU?
One will be increased levels of heavy metals in the contaminated water. Then pesticides and fertilizers have been implicated.
Correct.
And third, heat stress nephropathy. Due to prolonged dehydration, repeated subacute insults to the kidney can cause recurrent ATN and leading to finally CIN.
Correct. So basically, in agriculture, insecticides, heavy metals, silica, and even pesticides, and then as you told, dehydration. Recurrent dehydration can predispose them to CKD of U. Do you have a diagnosis in our India for CKD-U?
Diagnostic criteria, sir?
Yeah. Are you aware?
No, sir. Like it's a diagnosis of exclusion, like after ruling out everything.
Yes, agreeable. So if patient should have CKD, of course, as per KDIGO definition, and then you rule out all other causes. Which are all the causes you want to rule out? Mainly, which is the most common cause of CKD?
Like diabetic nephropathy. Sir.
Yes, so you should rule out diabetes, hypertension, and with an ultrasound, other genetic diseases and renal calcular disease, everything, whatever you have told with the negative history, you should rule out all those things.
Yes,
and of course, patient should not have massive proteinuria, mild proteinuria, and of course, mild hypertension. And in the biopsy, you can have
chronic tubulointerstitial nephritis.
Predominant CTIN and no other glomerular suggestive of glomerular disease. Then you can diagnose as CTIN. Yes. That criteria done from our own Indian ISN in your place only. In 2017, you can just search it. They have made again definitive, probable, and possible. It is just for the academic purpose. What I want to say in your case, coming to the case, so here, since we don't have much history about proteinuria, and patient is an occupational with an welder, and he has an advanced kidney disease on biopsy, which is the first time detected. So there may be a chance of CTIN also. What I want to say is you can't just fix with the CGN, and there may be another possibility of CTN. Both DDs can be kept at that time of at the end of your history.
Okay, sir.
You got it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So as far as the initial presentation is concerned, I agree with your RPRF diagnosis, where you can have all the three diagnoses. Means it may be an it depends on the proteinuria and urinalysis, as you told. It may be an vasculitis, it may be ANCA or IgA, or it may be C3GN. Only odd features in your case was patient had very mild hypertension requiring one drug, which is very odd in a glomerular disease. So in which are the RPRF when you have mild hypertension or low hypertension points to which DDs?
Like anti-GBM disease generally does not present with very high hypertension, sir.
Very good. Then what?
Then ANCA vasculitis.
Correct. So it's a basically RPGN. Any disease.
All RPGNs
with crescentic GN. Why in crescentic GN BP will be low? Means not high.
Sir, one, there will not be enough time for the renin-angiotensin aldosterone activation. Okay. And second, the renal.
It's not the time. Means I don't think it's a time. It's basically it will be destroyed. The RAS, whatever the JG cells apparatus in the kidney because of the crescents. You understood now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there will be,
rapid destruction of the renal parenchyma.
Correct. So that may be that is the reason where you don't get severe hypertension. So actually, with mild hypertension, if the patient has a significant proteinuria in your case, you put those diagnoses in the top. But odd feature again is, what is the main odd feature in your case, which again causes some tubular disease?
There was no hematuria.
Okay. Another important thing. You stressed in your history that he had how much urine output?
It was 2 liters when he presented to us.
Yes, it's almost completely non-oliguric. Right? You had a very good urine output. So non-oliguric AK will be rare. Means it pushes the diagnosis of glomerular again to the down compared to tubular.
So,
you got the point?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, where that also confuses. So unless we have a proteinuria how much, then that way give us a clue for whether it is a tubular disorder or a glomerular disorder. You got it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So coming to the complications, like how you would have done better in your case if you had seen him in the November when the patient has come to you in your case.
Sir, I would have gone ahead with a renal biopsy,
Yeah.
and
Done already, right?
yes, sir.
Good.
So if based on the biopsy report, then the immunosuppression, whether it is necessary or not, depends on the diagnosis.
It has not given, and probably it's not
So,
treatable disease. Yes,
yes, sir. He was told to be like an advanced stage of kidney failure.
correct.
So my next step will be to conservatively manage him as long as possible. So dietary fluid restriction, salt restriction, then dietary phosphate restriction, and then AVF construction at the earliest.
Yes.
Then hepatitis B vaccination, and check his hemoglobin iron studies, making sure that the anemia part is corrected.
What I wanted you to tell is more of you labeled him as CKD, right? First
Yes,
thing is
sir.
you labeled him as CKD, and
Yes,
then
sir.
you want to look for the etiology that we have discussed, and you are
Yes,
going
sir.
to address the complications, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So you have to list the
So-
complications and tell what are all the things you can do, and of course vaccination you are told, and you wanted access to be prepared.
Created. So one is anemia of CKD, sir.
Yes.
So for that, hemoglobin, peripheral smear, ferritin, and TSAT. Then CKD MBD to be ruled out. So serum calcium, phosphorus, PTH, and vitamin D levels. Then making sure that there is no volume overload.
Yes.
Then with respect to electrolytes, serum potassium, and I'll start him on oral sodium bicarbonate supplementation for the acidosis.
Yes.
And he has got like any other features of uremia like pruritus or gastritis to be conservatively managed as long as possible. If it is unresponsive to medical therapy, then I will initiate him on RRT.
Okay, good. So just another thing I wanted to ask you is, you didn't tell in the history wise, you would have asked nocturia, whether he had nocturia.
Actually, I do not ask for nocturia. Sir.
It's very important. No? If he has a history of nocturia for a longer period in the back, what it points to?
Underlying tubulointerstitial disease.
Yes, that should have been one negative history which you have not covered. And then another one, as I told, proteinuria, if you give some information, it will be good. And what happened to the renal failure in the 2 weeks when you have taken the history now? Like that's also one point which you should have told us in a better way. Like you told mild hypertension and edema.
Yes,
as far as whether it's progressed rapidly in that 2 weeks, that also makes a lot of difference for us to conclude the case, whether it's a chronic disease or it's a stable disease or it points to an acute interstitial nephritis.
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, he was discharged in December end, and he was due for follow-up after 1 month. So when he came for the next follow-up itself, it was with full volume overload with uremic features, vomiting and hiccups for 2 weeks.
Yes, no, that I agree. No, what I'm telling is in your presenting history, if you elaborate them a bit, it will be good. Means we will know exactly whether it is an RPRF. Means if had a renal function which was told to have progressed, and then a biopsy was done. You got my point, no?
Yes, sir.
So coming to the dialysis part, like what we'll do is we'll go for the examination and then we'll discuss about the rest of the things on dialysis and complications.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. 1 minute. We'll just ask Balla sir anything you want to add. Balla sir?
Please, she should continue with the examination.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
General examination, his pulse rate was 60 per minute, regular in rhythm, adequate volume. All peripheral pulses were well felt. His blood pressure was 170/90 in right arm supine position and 160/90 in standing position. Respiratory rate was 18 per minute, abdominothoracic type, and he was afebrile at the time of examination. There were no bony deformities or bony tenderness, no pallor, no icterus, no pedal edema, no lymphadenopathy. His height was 166 centimeter, weight 43 kilogram, BMI was 15.5. There was a 2 centimeter transverse scar seen in the left wrist. No thrill was felt over the previous AV fistula. No erythema or tenderness. A 3 centimeter transverse scar seen in the left mid forearm, 2 centimeter above the previous scar. Examination of the left radiocephalic fistula. On inspection, distended venous outflow veins were visible for a distance of 10 centimeter from the AV anastomotic site. Few collateral veins were seen in the upper forearm. The skin over the AV fistula site was normal, no erythema or swelling. On arm elevation test, there was complete collapse of the venous outflow channel. Pulse augmentation was present on applying proximal pressure. On palpation, there was no warmth or tenderness. Good volume pulse was palpable and continuous thrill was palpable in the over the AVF site and up to 10 centimeter of the outflow vein. On auscultation, there was a low-pitched continuous bruit heard over the fistula. Examination of the left hand and the fingers, there were no skin changes, color changes, no skin ulcerations, no nail bed changes. Examination of the right IJV HD catheter insertion site, no erythema or exudate at the exit site, no tenderness or purulent discharge on mild pressure, no dilated veins over the chest, neck or face, and no edema of the right upper limb, chest or face. Respiratory system, bilateral normal vesicular breath sounds heard, no added sounds. Cardiovascular system, S1 and S2 were heard. There was an LV-S3 heard over the apex and apical impulse was felt in the left 6th intercostal space at mid-clavicular line. No cardiac murmurs. His abdomen was soft, scaphoid, no congestive hepatomegaly, no ascites. And nervous system examination, no focal neurological deficits.
Urinalysis?
Sir, urinalysis we do not do right now, sir.
Okay.
Like it was done at the beginning when he had presented.
That you told me urine 2
Yes,
plus
sir.
and nil.
Yes, sir. Right now his urine output is less than 100 ml per day, sir.
Okay, with what are all the your aims of examination in your case?
So right now his presenting complaint was fever for 1 day while on dialysis.
Yes.
So my first thing will be to rule out a catheter related bloodstream infection since the catheter was 2 months old. And once the CRBSI is ruled out, other causes of fever to be evaluated.
No, what's the definition of CRBSI?
So as per the IDSA guidelines, the same organism, same microbial organism to be grown both from the peripheral vein blood culture and from the catheter tip culture. Or if we are comparing two sets of blood cultures, one from the peripheral vein and one from the catheter hub culture, then there should be either a differential time to positivity, where the catheter hub culture grows, the colony counts grow 2 hours at least earlier than the peripheral blood culture, or the colony count should be at least 3 folds higher than the peripheral blood culture.
Yeah, that is for the definitive, right?
Yes, sir, definitive.
Okay, what are all the definitions you have?
We have the IDSA definition for probable and possible CRBSI, sir.
Yes, what is possible, what is probable?
Sir, for probable, the differential time to positivity alone will be present. The quantitative broth culture need not be present, like more than 10 to the power 2 colony forming units need not be there. So for possible, both the cultures showing same organisms, but neither DTP, no differential time to positivity, nor the quantitative broth culture criteria fulfilled.
Now, can you tell us our Kedoki definition? Because that is for the IDSI probably. In Kedoki, what they say?
So Kedoki also like same thing. So one same organism with tip and peripheral vein culture.
Correct.
Or 2 blood cultures from the peripheral vein and catheter hub, or 2 blood cultures through both the lumens of the catheter, and all of them showing like the same organism.
For definitive, I agree, but when it comes to possible and probable, the definition will differ in Kedoki, right?
I'm not aware of that, sir.
No, basically in the possible and then probable. Possible means you have an fever with a catheter in situ, and then you may not have any diagnosis, means
Yes.
nothing in the blood culture, but you remove the catheter or give antibiotics, patient will be cured. You got my point?
Okay, sir.
Yes. In case of probable means you have only peripheral blood culture, but no, nothing from the catheter. But you remove the catheter or you treat the infection, fever will disappear. So then it points to probable CRBSI. Definitive means you will have both blood culture in both the catheter as well as from the periphery.
Right.
And then, as you told, like it's more than 3 times or whatever, even the tip also shows, and then it disappears with the treatment and of course with the catheter removal.
Mhm.
You got it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, any CRBSI, you told first you will think CRBSI, of course, it's a 2-month-old catheter. As a nephrologist, we always think, but as per definition, CRBSI, first you should rule out other causes
Other causes of infection.
that should be there, rather than put it as a second part of your evaluation as you will evaluate for other fevers. No, you have to simultaneously evaluate, rule out them, and then blame it on the catheter.
Catheter.
Okay. So how do you approach, when do you remove a catheter in a case of CRBSI?
Sir, if it is a non-tunneled catheter, then if a positive blood culture for Staphylococcus aureus or any gram-negative bacilli or any fungal or any mycobacterial, then we remove the catheter.
Yes.
If it is a tunneled cuffed catheter, then if the positive blood culture for Staphylococcus aureus or Pseudomonas or fungal or mycobacterial, we remove. Others we try to retain the catheter, like in terms of other GNB or Staphylococcus epidermidis.
No, that is as far as the organism you are telling, I agree with you. No,
Yes,
I
sir.
want to know clinically when you see a patient, what makes you to immediately remove the catheter? What makes you to preserve the catheter?
Yes, sir. If there are features of severe sepsis, like if the patient is in septic shock,
Correct.
or if
patient
there
in
is
shock,
evidence,
yes.
yes, sir. Or if there is any evidence of any metastatic infections like infective endocarditis, an epidural abscess, or septic arthritis, or a septic thrombophlebitis.
Agreeable. Yes, then.
Or if there is no clinical response, even after 72 hours of
Yes,
appropriate antibiotic
within
therapy.
72 hours, if no response, yes, then.
And that's also.
No, WBC wise, TLC wise.
Like leukocytosis,
Severe leukocytosis or
severe leukopenia also.
yeah, leukopenia. Both will make you
Neutropenic
to,
sepsis.
yes,
Yes.
yes, neutropenic sepsis. Yes, agreeable. So, what makes you to preserve as a clinician? Of course, you are told all the things which need to be removed. If they are not there, we will preserve. But another thing which makes you to preserve in any patient?
Like if there is no other AV access available,
Yes,
the
when you
patient
think
already
it's a
has.
patient has, that is the only lifeline, then we try to preserve that
Preserve it.
irrespective of the infection when you don't have any other options.
Sure.
Yes. So in your case, what are all the examination positive findings?
So the right IJV HD catheter site was completely all right, sir. Exit site was normal,
Yes.
and there was no discharge.
No, positive things, whatever you have. Exit site is fine, catheter site is fine. Then one fistula is failed, fistula scar is there. Other than that,
The
no
new
other
fistula
system.
is mature, sir.
Yeah, every fistula is mature. Yes. So, how did you decide that in this case the fistula is mature?
So first, on inspection, whether the venous outflow channels are well distended, and second thing, we have to rule out there are not too many collateral veins that
No. My question is how you decided in your case this you have done one
Fistula
is
is mature.
left fistula got failure, right? Left
Yes,
radius, that is the initial fistula, and
Yes, sir.
then you have a forearm fistula, right? This
Yes, sir. Mid
and
forearm.
it's done almost more than a month.
1 month, sir. Yes, sir.
More than a month. So what makes you to think the fistula is mature? Because you have to take a decision, no? Because you have a CRBSI,
So whether to cannulate, sir.
you remove the catheter and whether you can cannulate the fistula.
So first on inspection, I would like to see whether the veins are well developed. The venous outflow veins away from the AV fistula are well developed.
AV
Then on
fistula
palpation,
examination, how you classify? Means I agree with you. You have started to tell, but I want to know how you define yourself or
like it will be look, feel, and hear.
correct. So look, feel, and hear agreeable. So any rules you have where you can say it is mature?
Like the rule of 6 we
Yes.
usually
So
follow.
what is that rule of 6?
One, the fistula has to be less than 6 millimeter deep from the
Yes.
skin surface.
Correct.
Then the length of the straight vein segment should be at least 6 centimeter for
Yes.
2 needle placement.
Correct.
Then the fistula should be able to provide a blood flow of at least 600 ml per minute.
Correct.
And it needs at least 6 weeks for maturation. Then the diameter should be at least 6 millimeter.
Correct. So you have told me the rule of 6. So all these things fits in your case. Of course, you can't assess the blood flow unless you have a Doppler. So other things you feel it's good, like you have a good segment and
Yes,
you
sir.
think it is superficial, and so the bruit is good
Yes, sir.
and it is
And
well
the fiddle
conducted.
was good. Yes, sir.
Yes, yes. What other examination you want to do for as far as fistula is concerned in your case?
Sir, I would like to see both the distal and the proximal extremity of the fistula hand. So distal extremity, whether the distal pulses are well felt, whether the hands are warm, there is no pain as per the patient.
So what you want to rule out by seeing that?
Steele syndrome, sir.
Okay, agreeable. Yes. What test
No,
you do before do a fistula?
that will be Allen's test to see the patency of the palmar arch arteries.
Good, very good. How do you do? Can you tell me?
Yes, sir. So first we have to occlude either the radial or the ulnar artery and ask the patient to make a fist, clench the hand, and then he has to repeatedly clench the hand, and once he releases the hand, there has to be erythema of the hand even after occlusion of one artery. So that will indicate that the other artery is supplying through the collaterals.
Okay.
So if
No, occlude both arteries and make him fetch and release one. And
release
if
one, there will be erythema.
Yes, another again same thing and release the other one. Right. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What other tests? That's why you told you want to rule out steel. What is the? We see he has a catheter put for last 5 to 6 months, right?
Yes, sir.
So almost under that again the catheter is on the right side.
Same side, yes, sir.
So what else you want to see in the hand?
I would also want to rule out any central vein stenosis.
Yes. How you test for central vein stenosis?
Sir, again, that is on inspection, there can be edema of the ipsilateral arm,
Yes. Yeah,
neck,
that
and
means,
the face.
inspection wise, everything is fine in your case, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So what test you will do to see whether there is no central venous stenosis, like mild to moderate? In severe stenosis, yes, you will have-
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Like there will be certain signs during dialysis that will help us.
Now, what test I can ask you? That is not dialysis, yes, high venous pressure and other things. I
Yes,
agree.
sir.
Yes. Clinical examination.
Okay, so that will be a arm elevation test, sir.
Arm elevation test. Good. Then
And pulse augmentation test is for inflow stenosis.
inflow stenosis, yes. So if bruit is good, so these are all the two tests you should remember when you go to your dialysis rounds, that if you are suspecting, like if your technician says, sir, there is a high venous pressure, you should look into that. Means how frequently you should examine the fistulas?
So ideally during every visit for dialysis.
Ideally, very good. So you should examine in every visit and make sure that there on inspection wise nothing is there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what do you want to do in your case? Like as far as fistula is concerned, as far as CRBSI is concerned, what do you want to do?
Sir, I would draw a blood sample for the blood cultures from the peripheral vein and from the catheter hub and start on empirical antibiotics.
Correct.
Vancomycin and amikacin.
No, another thing, main important thing, you just don't told no for CRBS. In your case, fistula is ready. Why you want to keep the catheter? First thing is to remove the catheter. You need to keep the catheter and tell them to initiate through the
AV fistula. Yes, sir.
Yes. So the next thing is, in your case, he, other than CRBSA, what other complications he had as far as the dialysis is concerned?
So there were 2 episodes of acute pulmonary edema with emergency hospitalization.
Yeah, one is
However-
cardiac dysfunction you told. Yes,
Yes,
then.
sir. And second, during dialysis, he was told to have high blood pressures during the last 2 months.
So what do you call that?
Intradialytic hypertension, sir.
Can you list the common complications you come across during dialysis?
Yes, sir. So, if it is vascular access related, it can be like thrombosis or stenosis. Other things related to the dialysis per se, there can be either intradialytic hypertension or hypotension, muscle cramps. Then,
Now, which is the commonest given all the list? You can tell me the in the order of frequency.
yes, sir. So, commonest will be BP perturbation, sir. Either hypertension or hypotension.
Now, among which?
Amongst this, commonest is hypotension, sir.
Yes, yes. Majority will be intradialytic hypertension.
Hypotension.
First, if you take the Dogirdasan list, no, he starts with like a frequency only. First, he lists as intradialytic hypotension. Then second one.
Like, I don't know, remember the exact order in the book, sir. Like,
Okay. So second will be cramps. See, these are all the things. If you remember your dialysis rounds also, you will know patient will have either intradialytic hypertension and then cramps and then rest of the complications like pruritus or other things. Of course,
headache,
intradialytic hypertension is becoming a new entity. What is the incidence or prevalence of intradialytic hypertension?
that will be seen in 10 to 25% of the dialysis
Good.
patients.
So what may be the causes you think for the intradialytic hypertension?
One, rapid ultrafiltration might cause excessive activation of the renin angiotensin aldosterone, excessive activation of the sympathetic nerve, or there can be endothelial dysfunction causing an imbalance between the vasodilators and vasoconstrictors,
Okay.
or removal of antihypertensives during dialysis.
Yes.
And
important thing?
other dialysate composition related changes like high dialysate sodium.
No, that I agree. So, no.
And then
what I want to-
erythropoietin.
Yes, erythropoietin, good. Then
And then hypercalcemia.
now, what may be the first reason you think if somebody tells you that, sir, this patient has intradialytic hypertension? Means what makes what you check?
Volume overload should be ruled out. The patient
Yes.
has achieved
What you are
dry
going to
weight.
adjust? Yes, dry weight is very important. Like your first thing when you say somebody in the rounds that patient has intradialytic hypertension, your thing should go whether you have adjusted his dry weight appropriately.
Yes, sir.
These are all the etiology wise, like because we have not adjusted his dry weight and we are removing the volume inappropriate during dialysis, patient will have RAS activation, patient will have sympathetic overactivity, and of course decreased nitric oxide, increased endothelin 1. Like these are all the different mechanisms to cause the intradialytic hypertension. How do you define intradialytic hypertension? Do you have a specific definition?
Yes, sir. Rise in systolic blood pressure by more than 10 millimeter mercury from pre-HD to post-HD.
Yeah, means there are various definitions. Some say more than 10, some will say mean arterial pressure more than 15. There is another definition where after 2 to 3 hours of dialysis, the BP will shoot up in spite of removing ultrafiltration. You understood?
Yes, sir.
So there are various definitions as far as intradialytic hypertension. There is no standardized definition at present. So these are all depending upon the previous definitions you can say.
Yes,
so in your patient, what was the highest BP he had? What was the highest BP he had during the dialysis?
So he was told to be like it was around 180, so
okay,
as per this, but when I measured it was 170 in supine.
Okay. So hypertension in dialysis. So how do you diagnose? Means what are all the difficulties in the management of hypertension in dialysis patients?
In addition to the pre-dialysis, intra-dialysis and the post-dialysis BP measurements, ideal will be ambulatory BP monitoring for 44 hours in the interdialytic period.
Yes, so you should take the interdialytic BP. So among the 4 BPs we have, pre, post, intra and inter, the most important thing which decides the cardiovascular morbidity or mortality is interdialytic BP, and as you told, 24-hour ABPM is the gold standard, right? So in this case, what measures you want to take to prevent this intradiabetic hypertension? Non-pharmacological and pharmacological.
Yes, sir. The non-pharmacological first will be dietary salt and fluid restriction.
Mm.
And second thing, I have to make sure that the dry weight is appropriate for him.
Okay. How do you define dry weight?
It is the body weight below which hypotension occurs. Below which, if we attempt further fluid removal, hypotension occurs.
That's means still in a better way you can define.
Like extended definition of dry weight will be patient does not have any nausea, vomiting, or post dialysis fatigue.
Yes, correct. Means patient will have, means it is the exact dry weight, means the weight which appears post dialysis, which makes the dialysis smooth, and patient will be comfortable, and his BP medications will come down, and his BP will remain throughout normal. Understood?
Yes, sir.
So no symptoms or signs of any part of the uremia, and you will not have any edema.
Yes, sir.
So what are all the things, what is the best way to assess dry weight in an individual?
That will be like electrical bioimpedance technique.
No, what is the best way?
Clinically, sir, like we keep measuring their weight,
Yes,
the symptoms.
clinical is the best one compared to rest, because even we have many measures, like we have BCM machine, BIA, means bioimpedance techniques, and what are all the other techniques you are aware of?
Thermal dilution method.
Okay. What else you can use bedside to see, to say patient is volume overloaded during dialysis?
Ultrasound of the
yes, ultrasound, yes.
lungs. Sir.
Yes, then
Lungs
and ultrasound of
IVC diameter.
Correct. So these are all the various methods. So you can use, and biochemical markers. Which are all the biochemical markers you are aware of?
For dry weight, sir.
Yeah.
Not sure, sir.
Which one will be higher if there's a cardiac failure?
NT-proBNP.
Yes, BNP basically. BNP can give an idea whether it is very high. You can use it as a measurement to decide whether the patient is on appropriate dry weight or not.
Yes, sir.
So there are many criteria. Means I can't remember the exact, but you should, as a student, you should remember what will be the IVC diameter, where you think is high volume or appropriate volume, and even for the lung ultrasound, and even the BNP cutoff values are there. And even BCM machines, there are some cutoff values that I think you should read. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Then here your patient had recurrent pulmonary edema, and you have increased this frequency to 3 per
twice weekly, sir.
Yes. So other complications for CKD wise, this anemia is fine. CKD MBD is fine, right? There is
Yes,
nothing.
sir.
On
Clinically, there was no evidence of any CKD MBD, sir.
Okay. So another important complication wise, he had COVID, right?
Yes, sir. COVID admission 3 months back, sir.
Yes. Tell me about what COVID, like just tell some briefly tell us about COVID in ESRD.
So the incidence rate, like I don't know the exact incidence rate in our HD unit, sir. Probably like between 20 to 30%.
Yes.
And with respect to clinical manifestations, it was similar to the general population. There will be, they had fever. Few people had the breathlessness. And the period of hospitalization on an average was around 10 to 12 days. And the severity of the manifestations did not differ significantly when compared to the general population.
Outcome?
The outcome was similar to the general population, sir.
Which on what basis you are telling in COVID outcomes in ESRD? Means dialysis population.
Yes, sir. One JASN article was there, sir.
Okay.
So in that, the mortality rate was less than 10%.
Okay. See, in the Western country, whatever they are reported, it's around 10 to 14% mortality. But when it comes to the non-CKD, means normal population, what is the mortality you are expecting in COVID?
That will be like entire population, maybe 2 to 3%, sir.
Yeah, so it's almost 1 to 3%, whatever. So mortality is high in CKD population. Do you have any Indian studies recently published on COVID, on ESRD, on maintenance dialysis, and what was the mortality?
There was a study from Mumbai, sir.
Correct, yes. They have compared 3 centers, and what was the mortality there?
So there it was 10 to around 10%, sir.
It was a bit on the higher side. They had around 25 to 30% mortality. I mean, there is a significant mortality was there in their shop, whatever the small number of population. So as far as COVID is concerned, the mortality is high in CKD5D. So what the COVID stage in your patient you think? He was 10 days admitted, he was on oxygen.
Yes, sir. So probably grade 1 CT changes, Corad's changes, less than 25% lung involvement.
He was on oxygen, no? And he was there for
10 days.
CT changes you forget, like Corad stages. What are all the stages in the CT for COVID? You are aware of?
Four stages, less than 25%, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, more than 75% of lung involvement.
Okay. So here in your case, he was on oxygen. Whether he was given any antivirals?
No, sir. He does not remember receiving any experimental drug therapy or blood product transfusion for the COVID.
Okay.
Like nothing to suggest plasma exchange.
What drugs you can give in COVID?
First is steroids in the form of dexamethasone.
Yes.
8 milligram IV OD. Then low molecular weight heparin.
Yes.
Enoxaparin 40 or 60 milligrams subcutaneously OD. And for patients who have grade 2 and above CT changes with increasing oxygen requirement, we can try remdesivir.
Yes. Okay, remdesivir can we give in dialysis population? What's your insight or at your center knowledge?
Sir, it can be given, sir. We are giving in our ESRD patients with severe COVID, sir. Like
What's the result?
It has been good, sir. Like many of them actually return back, like they do not require mechanical ventilation at least.
Correct. So what do you think? COVID and kidney manifestations, what's our thing? Means what is the commonest manifestation they have come across? And
Sir, COVID and kidney AKI has been seen.
What's the most common?
And many
most common kidney manifestation.
Morning, ma'am.
It will be proteinuria, sir. 50% of them had proteinuria.
Yes. Proteinuria, hematuria are most common.
20 to 25% hematuria.
Yes. Then comes your AKI.
Yes, sir.
And chronic effects we don't know still. So AKI of COVID differs from in any way to the other sepsis part.
It is an important prognostic marker and for mortality, sir.
Yes, treatment-wise?
Treatment-wise, the indications for RRT remain the same as for any other condition.
Very good. Then
till now,
there is not much change. It means indications and the modality-wise.
Modality-wise, we can use either hemodialysis or peritoneal dialysis or CRRT, so depending on the hemodialysis.
Any of the modalities can be used as per like we are using for any other AKI. Yes. So and then another important question is, would you like to stop telmisartan if the patient is on that, if they develop COVID in our CKD patient?
No, sir. Initially, there was a controversy that they exacerbated the viral
what's
entry.
The link between the COVID and the angiotensin system?
So the COVID enters into the cell through ACE2 receptors, angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptors. Okay. So if we give an AC inhibitor or an ARB, there can be upregulation of these receptors, and it might promote further viral entry, causing severe infection. That was the initial thought process.
Yeah. Now what has changed?
Now it does not. It has not been proven to upregulate the receptors, and there has been no difference in people who have been continuing on AC inhibitors and ARBs in the severity of COVID infection.
That's yes, I agree with you. So people now suggesting even you should give ARBs. Some people,
it might be beneficial.
How it is beneficial then?
Probably it will block the receptors and prevent the viral entry.
No. Why it will block it? No, you only told, no, ACE2 will be upregulated. No,
Yes, sir.
it can't block it. So what's the other thing? So what it can block? It blocks the RAS system, right?
Yes, sir.
So what the other people thinking means, other hypothesis is, if you give AC inhibitor or it blocks the RAS system, so that RAS system is the one which, because of the high RAS in COVID or any infection, which makes the ACE2 receptors to upregulate. You got my point?
Okay, sir.
So they think blocking it may help.
Okay, sir.
It is not just blocking the AC inhibitors receptors that makes the ACE2 gene, ACE2 receptor to up. High RAS itself can make the ACE2 expression high. So if you block the RAS, there may be lesser expression. This is a theoretical basis. Don't have any evidence. So in your case, during the COVID period, he lost his fistula. So what is the etiology you think?
Sir, COVID has been associated with a prothrombotic state.
Yes, you think that is the one which they caused in your fellow, or what else?
Sir, he also presented with vomiting
Yeah.
at that time. Don't know whether there was underlying hypovolemia that also predisposed to the AVF thrombosis.
So he was on heparin, most probably.
Yes, sir. After admission to the ward, he was on heparin, sir.
Yes. So we don't know whether it may be prothrombotic state of COVID may would have caused or not. So what are all the in your case, it doesn't have any other thrombotic episodes, right? So we don't know exactly whether it is due to hypovolemia during that period or during the dialysis you would have got any. There is no hematoma or anything during the dialysis.
No, sir. No, sir. Till then, there were no issues with the fistula or with the dialysis.
No, during that period when the fistula failed.
Sir, on the same day he got admitted to the COVID ward, that day he realized the fistula had failed. So 2 days prior, he had dialyzed.
If it by chance, if it is not a COVID scenario, what are all the things you would have done to rescue that fistula?
Yes, sir. Like if it is in the initial like 2 to 3 hours of thrombus, then we can try direct catheter directed thrombolysis of the AVF thrombus.
Correct. Means you would have done an intervention, right? To
yes, sir.
remove the thrombus and do a fistuloplasty. Because of the COVID, probably you would have not preferred that and put an IJV and went ahead with the thing. So which fistula you think is better to for the intervention fellow to do a thrombus? Means the success rate will be good.
Success rate better with brachiocephalic compared to the radiocephalic.
Okay. Just another question on fistula is, do you think the Steele syndrome are common with radiocephalic because you do Allen test, or it's a brachiocephalic?
It's more common with the radiocephalic, sir.
Just recheck your knowledge. Okay, so
yes,
it's more common with brachiocephalic, means the upper fistula, because you are making a big artery, no? Then there is a chance that the blood supply may be less. Means radial artery and ulnar artery may be damaged due to anything. You understood, no? Because of the atherosclerosis. So it's more common with brachiocephalic Steele syndrome compared to that of the radiocephalic. So just another important thing in your case is what happened to his urine output?
So his urine output dropped to less than 100 ml per day 2 months after initiation of hemodialysis.
2 liters in November, right? Or 1 liter?
Yes, sir. In 2 liters in December. January, when he was initiated, it was 1 liter.
So
then in March.
So what is the significance of this?
Sir, residual renal function plays an important role in patient survival on RRT.
Correct.
And, second thing, we have to keep monitoring the residual renal function to adjust our dialysis prescription.
What do you think? What made this residual renal function to go away in your case?
Probably intradialytic hypotension episodes.
But no hypotension, no? In your patient, he never had intradialytic hypotension, right? Hypertension he had.
Yes, or the underlying renal disease process.
Maybe yes, of course. Very unlikely because his disease itself present like a non-oliguric, as I told at that present. It's not an oliguric presentation. So what is the main thing you think? No, main thing is the hemodialysis per se itself. So if you start somebody on hemodialysis, here your
There will
patient
be a
was,
drop.
yes, he was on 2 per week, and now you are increased to 3 per week, and he had a cardiac dysfunction and lot of volume overload issues. So you have removed more ultrafiltration, and his interdialytic weight gain initially you told up to 4
4
kilos, now it
kilograms.
has come down to 3 kilos. That itself can make a residual kidney function to almost
Okay.
nil. So is it advantage or disadvantage?
It is a disadvantage, sir.
How do you define residual renal function theory part?
Yes, sir. It will be the average of urea and the creatinine clearance on a patient in a patient on dialysis.
Correct.
That will be UV by P, urine concentration of urea or creatinine.
How much? How much? How much? Means you did a creatinine clearance. You say it's a good residual function or bad residual function?
It is like less than 2 ml per minute will be like a very poor residual renal function.
So amount wise, in the previous KDO keys, means in the base initial period, to tell about amount, means it's a gross now. Means you can't always, how frequently in your 3 years you measure somebody's residual kidney function, you do for both urea, creatinine, and then club it and then say it is more than 2 ml or less than 2 ml, right?
Yes, sir.
What is the amount wise?
Urine output amount, sir.
Yeah, yes, correct. How much?
It will be like maybe less than 200 ml per day.
Yeah, it's 100 ml, means more than 100 ml, they say still you should preserve it. So what are all the ways you can preserve in any dialysis patient?
Sir, one, we have to make sure the patient does not go into intradialytic hypotension. Then proper dry weight assessment.
Correct.
There should not be any muscle cramps, like episodes of nausea, vomiting during or post dialysis.
No, first thing is salt restriction, water restriction, so that, and main other things. What are all the things comes to you? Like for example, your patient has some very good residual renal function. What are all the things you avoid when he is coming to you in your clinical practice?
Like nephrotoxic drugs.
Correct.
Then probably I might continue on an ARB.
Yes, AC inhibitors, ARBs can be considered. Yes.
That's all.
Yes. So first thing, like in you know the entire summary of your case.
Yes, sir.
So what I want to ask you is how you would have differently managed this case. I didn't get much time to ask about transplant evaluation, that you can read up because it's already 10:30. What I want to know is your approach to case. If you are in an ideal scenario and you are seeing the patient in November, what are all the differences you would have made to this patient so that the outcome may be better?
Sir, one, I would have liked the AV fistula to be constructed at that point itself, in December itself.
So you think fistula would have been done in Jan in this patient, you would have been done in the December itself, right?
December itself, so that
better than that, what you would have done?
Or at that point, since he had a good renal output, I could have started him on peritoneal dialysis compared to the hemodialysis.
Yes, in this case, PD is good. What is the PD first concept?
So
which
that
are the
will.
countries? Are you aware of which countries will always do PD for
first.
everybody, like how we do hemo for majority? Or neighboring countries? Neighboring means in and around South Asia.
Oh, no, sir.
Okay, Hong Kong, Thailand, there all the concept is PD first. Means any patient, they will put a PD catheter and start them on PD. You understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, PD would have been a better option than an HD if you want to preserve, because he is planned for a transplantation.
Yes, sir.
If he has, what is the ideal time you would have done the transplantation for this fellow?
Ideally, the best will be preemptive renal transplant.
Then what access you will consider if you are planning for a preemptive, and what the guidelines say?
If the transplant can be done within 6 months of the initial presentation, we can go ahead using a tunneled cuffed catheter itself.
6 months is a very big duration.
3 months. Sir.
3 months, 90 days. See, if you are planning something where you can evaluate the donor and you are going to put a donor, if you want to initiate on dialysis, yes, you can put a tunneled
Tunneled
catheter.
cuff catheter,
Yes,
and
yes.
hemodialysis.
Yes. So if like he has come in emergency in Jan to you,
Yes, sir.
you are planning for a fistula,
Yes, sir.
and he had multiple CRBSI.
Yes, sir.
So what catheters you prefer than an untunneled catheter? So untunneled catheter as a guideline wise, how long you can use?
Like maximum for 1 week, sir. If we anticipate catheter usage beyond 1 week, we have to change to a tunneled cuffed catheter.
Correct. So in your case also, like you know that it's a CKD5 and you may need long-term dialysis. We can put if the options are there. It depends upon the center and the facility. Like
Yes, sir.
in a government institute or in our institute, we go ahead
So,
with temporary.
actually, we used to put tunneled catheters in OT, sir.
Yes.
So now, because of the
Yes, the OT.
COVID, the elective OTs.
No, not in
not
that way I'm telling.
functioning.
So it depends on the scenario where we put. So tunneled catheter would have been ideal.
Yes,
So
sir. Otherwise, we put tunneled catheters only for long-term patients.
yes. So what are all the things you decide before you put a catheter? Other than that, veins are fine, scan the patient and other things. What other things you make main thing? Like for example, I'm a right dominant fellow. Which catheter you will put me if you want me to start on dialysis?
So
Where?
the fistulas are preferred on the non-dominant hand. So the catheters are inserted on the side contralateral to the fistula side.
Yes, so that's correct. So always you should know the dominance of the hand, then you can decide which side the catheter can be put. And if you are really good enough and you have all the facility, you can put if the patient is not planned for a transplant, like an elderly or anything, you can put a femoral pump cath and plan for fistula so that you can preserve all the veins, both the hands.
Yes.
Preservation of veins is very important as far as the case is concerned.
Yes, sir.
I think,
Dr. Shankar.
Sir, almost finished, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just want to say hello to you. You continue. I will try to leave up now. Very nice.
No, it's already 10:34, sir. I think we can end.
Yeah, no, nice. It's okay. You taught very nicely.
Thank you, sir.
And, and thank you, Dr. Aarti.
Thank you, sir.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Aarti, as far as your presentation is a very good presentation, summarizing is good. So open your DDs always. Don't fix for only CGN. You can put CTIN also in your case. And in the initial presentation, yes, RPRF should come to the first diagnosis. But again, there it may be acute interstitial nephritis also in addition to whatever you had, because patient was non-oliguric and mild hypertension. Yeah, means you have to wide open your diagnosis. And as far as the COVID and other answers, and the rest of the dialysis part is theoretical aspect. So whatever I asked and you answered majority of the questions. Then transplant evaluation, I couldn't ask you because it's important in your case. Means what is the donor evaluation and recipient evaluation? Just can you tell me what are all the things which are new in the KDIGO for the donor and recipient,
Yes,
which
sir.
others can remember?
Sir, one is with respect to the diabetes. Even diabetics can be accepted as donors, provided there is no evidence of
yes, agreeable. Then
no evidence of end organ damage. And similarly, hypertensives can be accepted as donors, provided they have good control with a single antihypertensive drug and no evidence of end organ damage. And even patients with renal cystic kidney diseases also, like class 1 Bosniak cyst can be accepted.
Fine, that's fine. Then recipient wise?
Recipient wise, changes like HCV.
Yes, very good.
Donor.
Yes. HCV is not a major thing for now, and you can just go ahead with the transplant with the oral antiviral drugs, whatever is available.
Fibrintasvir and glycaprevir pre-transplant.
Another one, age in there now. I think any age you can do for the recipient. Means you try to do if as long as he doesn't have comorbidity. It should not be a restriction for to think of transplant, especially for live or cadaver. Okay, then all the best from my side.
Thank you, sir.
For your exams. It was a nice presentation.
Yes. Thank
Raju,
you.
sir, hand over to you, sir. Balla,
Yes,
sir.
thank you, Dr. Shankar. Excellent discussion, very useful for everybody, for even nephrologists, all the nephrologists who are attending. And I just want to highlight a few points. Like examiner clearly told you that he wanted apart from CGN, CIN also as a differential diagnosis. And don't just concentrate on only one. Don't narrow down your possibilities. So keep all the possibilities because it could be CIN also, like CTDU also. Then biopsy, he stressed that why biopsy is required. It is for native kidney disease. And third is he discussed about endemic nephropathy, and then how diagnostic criteria for CTD-U that you should read. Then
Yes, sir.
importance of nocturia in the history, and then the criteria of CRBSI, how to diagnose it. And he discussed about AV fistula, about LN test, about stenosis in central vein, then from various complications of hemodialysis. So please read in order of chronology how commonest versus lowest, rarest. And he discussed in detail about intradilated hypertension, and a very important topic of dry weight, how to assess dry weight. And then he discussed about residual renal function and option of CAPD. Please don't forget, CAPD is also a very viable option. And invariably, the students, they forget about CAPD because they are not practicing CAPD. So CAPD is again a very important renal replacement therapy. And of course, the questions which he has asked you are very practical question, very relevant question, and will help you in your clinical practice in future also. Thank you, Dr. Shankar, for your sparing your valuable time. It has been very useful, and I'm sure in future also, once we request you, you will again give your time for us. And
thank you very much, sir. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. Thank you.
Yes, and I think she has presented well, and you have already passed her.
Yeah, sir.
Sure. So you have done well, and examiner's assessment is that you are passed.
Yes, sir.
So I will like to share here that on 5th and 6th of September, we are having our annual conference of nutrition and metabolism, and it will be a virtual conference. The registration is free. I will request Mr. Raja to send the link to all the delegates, so they can register. It is free. It will be a virtual conference. It will be very useful for all of you.
We'll do that, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Raja.
yeah. So, thank you, Dr. Balaji. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Shankar Prasad for having spared his time, as well as Dr. Aarti, who is going to appear for examinations. I hope all the students who have participated for the last 18 weeks, this program would have largely benefited each and every one of you to prepare for examinations. We are sure that in the next 1 or 2 weeks, when you're going to have your examinations, it's going to be really useful. So we wish you all very best of luck from the wholehearted from Microlabs Limited, and we hope that you all pass out in flying colors and commence your practice. So we look forward to meet one and all of you post your examinations and once you commence your practice. And I also take this opportunity to thank all the teachers and the guest faculties who have been sparing their valuable time because Monday is the very busy day for all of you. And every Monday sharp at 9 o'clock we have been starting, and almost 1.5 to 2 hours each and every one of you have been sparing your valuable time. So I once again thank from the bottom of my heart to all the teachers and the faculties who could spare their time and spend the time with their students. So thank you one and all of you. Next week is going to be incidentally the Teachers' Day, September 5th. So I think there's a lovely opportunity for each and every one of the students to thank their teacher too. Although we are all thankful throughout our lifetime. So with this, I officially end this the first season of the this edition with almost 18 weeks. So we look forward once again to meet you in the next edition for the next batch who will be coming out over the third year. So until then, see you. And
no, I just want to ask Aarti, what was the biopsy report? I mean, we are all interested to know what was the biopsy
Sir,
report?
it was global glomerulosclerosis and IF was negative, sir.
Significant IFTA.
Yes, sir. Significant IFTA.
So still the biopsy also doesn't, what they told, it's a CGN they told or CTIN they told in the biopsy?
Sir, it was reported as global glomerulosclerosis.
Okay, right. So IF was negative.
IF was negative, sir.
But mostly it's a CTIN, we don't know. Because the global glomerulosclerosis and IFTA significantly will be there in most of the things. It depends upon proteinuria was how much in your case?
So first presentation 2+, sir.
No, that's also we couldn't quantify it. 24 hour?
I did not look at the report, sir.
Okay. Now if it is subnephrotic, again it more favors with CTIN.
Yeah.
Another thing I just wanted to, before ending from Raja sir, is that as far as your nutrition conference is there, your patient BMI is very low, 15.
15.5, sir.
A lot of questions can be asked on nutrition because it's a very much malnourished. How you improve adequacy wise and what are all the methods to improve nutrition in a CKD 5D that we couldn't discuss. Okay. Anyway,
Yes,
all
sir.
the best again. Thank you, Raja
Thank
sir,
you,
for interfering.
Yeah, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And I once again thank you also. And not the least, Dr. Ashwini, Dr. Anurag, Dr. Balaji, as well as Dr. Rana, who have been part of this whole of the last 18 sessions. I would not forget to thank them. I also thank my local coordinator, Mr. Deepak Sharma, who have been also helping to fix the entire thing along with my colleague, Mr. Naveen. So as you're all aware, these entire links are all uploaded into the YouTube. So till 18 editions, and Mr. Naveen, who is my colleague, is constantly in touch with every student in the nephrology. So kindly contact him for any further assistance from our end. So thank you once again, all of you, and have a great week ahead.